Hello, everyone. Welcome to Broken English Club podcast.
So, I want you to put yourself in this incredibly specific, but I think universally horrifying scenario.
Oh no, I feel like I know where this is going already.
You probably do. So you are hanging out with a group of friends, right? Everyone is relaxed, the conversation is flowing, and you have the floor.
Right, you're the center of attention.
Exactly. You lean in, you're feeling completely confident, and you deliver what you think is a perfectly articulated thought. But instead of, nods of agreement,
Yeah.
the entire group just freezes for a fraction of a second, and then they burst into this breath-stealing, just hysterical laughter.
Oh, it's the absolute worst feeling.
It really is. And you were just left standing here entirely disoriented because without realizing it at all, you used the completely wrong word.
It's a visceral shock to the system.
Yeah.
You experience this immediate, almost dizzying plunge from total social dominance to just absolute confusion.
Yeah, exactly.
Your brain is basically scrambling to rewind the last 5 seconds of audio just to figure out what actually came out of your mouth.
I always think of it like it's like stepping on a rake in a cartoon, but for your ego, You are walking on a perfectly flat sidewalk, and somehow you manage to trip over air.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
Right. Well, today we are doing a deep dive into a short, really fascinating piece of writing that captures this exact phenomenon. It's an excerpt, and it's titled The Uncountable Mistake, Mastering the Word Advice.
Yeah, it's a great little script.
It is. And our mission for you today is to pull this brief interaction entirely apart. We're going to look at the hidden evolutionary mechanics of group laughter, the frankly bizarre cognitive way our brains categorize the physical world into language.
Which is wild, by the way.
So wild. And we'll also get into the actual neuroscience of why our old habits are so ridiculously stubborn, and finally the heavy emotional toll of trying to learn a new skill in front of your peers.
The scenario presented in this text is just incredibly relatable. So we have this guy, right? He's at a tea stall with his friends, and he's looking for some serious financial guidance.
Right, he wants to sound really adult.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He lowers his voice to sound super mature, and he says, "Bro, give me some advices about money."
And the reaction is just ruthless. One friend just repeats the word advices, and the entire group totally loses it.
They absolutely lose it.
And the speaker is left completely bewildered, asking what he did wrong. But, before we even get into the grammar of what he said, I really want to look at that reaction itself.
The laughter.
Yeah. Why is laughter the immediate, uncontrollable response to a linguistic slip? I mean, it feels so aggressive, even if it is strictly among friends.
Well, if you look at laughter through the lens of evolutionary psychology and sociology, it is rarely just about something being funny.
Wait, really?
Yeah, not at its core. Laughter is primarily a social signal. So one of the leading theories out there, it's called the incongruity resolution theory. It suggests that laughter actually evolved as a sort of false alarm signal.
Okay, a false alarm for what exactly?
So our brains are constantly predicting what is going to happen next. We're always trying to stay one step ahead. When someone is speaking, we subconsciously anticipate the rhythm, the vocabulary, the syntax.
Sure, we know what words are supposed to come next.
Right. So when the speaker suddenly drops a word like advices, it breaks that shared reality. The brain detects a sudden anomaly, it flags it as a potential error or threat, but then immediately realizes, oh, wait, it isn't a physical threat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it triggers laughter to release that sudden buildup of cognitive tension.
So the laughter is basically the brain's error message telling the rest of the group that a pattern was broken, but hey, we're all still safe.
Precisely. But, and here's the harsh part, it serves a secondary, much more brutal function, which is maintaining the boundaries of the tribe.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, in a group setting, speaking the exact same dialect with the exact same grammatical rules is a really profound in-group signal. It literally proves you belong there.
Okay, so when he messes up the word.
When this character accidentally pluralizes advice, he inadvertently signals that he doesn't actually know the rules of the tribe. So the group laughs to bond over their shared recognition of the norm. But the inevitable byproduct is that they instantly alienate the person who made the mistake.
That is so harsh.
It is. The power dynamic shifts in a millisecond. He goes from being a respected peer, asking a serious question, to an outsider being mocked.
Which perfectly explains that terrible feeling of isolation we were talking about. You are suddenly trapped in this little bubble of confusion, demanding to know what you said, while everyone else is bonded together in the joke.
Exactly.
So obviously, this social freeze has to be thawed by logic, which brings us to the actual grammatical crime scene of the text. The friend finally calms down and explains the error, pointing out that advice is an uncountable noun. You literally cannot put an S on the end of it.
Right.
But the character who made the mistake, he defends himself by saying he wanted many advices, like he wanted a large quantity of guidance.
And honestly, his logic is flawless. Assuming you don't know the very specific categorization rules of English. I mean, he wanted plurality, so he applied the standard plural marker. It is a perfectly rational linguistic assumption to make.
Okay, I'm going to push back pretty heavily on the English language here because his logic isn't just flawless. I think it exposes how totally absurd English grammar actually is.
Fair enough. Let's hear it.
Think about the synonyms for advice.
Yeah.
If I come to you for help, I can ask for 3 tips, right?
Yes.
I can ask for several suggestions. I can ask for 5 recommendations. All of those are completely acceptable, pluralized, countable things. So why on earth is advice treated as this formless, uncountable blob? It just feels like an arbitrary track designed to embarrass language learners.
I completely understand the frustration there, but it is actually not arbitrary. It reveals this totally fascinating cognitive division in how humans conceptualize the physical universe.
Okay, you've got my attention. How so?
So in linguistics, we divide nouns into count nouns and mass, or uncountable nouns. And this isn't just some dusty grammar rule. It reflects how our brains physically perceive boundaries in the world.
Boundaries. Like physical edges.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Count nouns represent discrete, bounded objects. So a tip, a suggestion, a coin, an apple. You can mentally draw a line around one apple and then visualize a second completely separate apple next to it. They have inherent physical or conceptual limits.
Okay, that makes sense. I can easily visualize 3 separate suggestions written on, like, 3 separate index cards.
Exactly. Mass nouns, however, represent concepts, substances, or materials that lack any inherent boundaries. Think of water or sand or air. If you pour water on a table, you don't have one water, you just have a puddle.
Right.
And if you had more water, you don't suddenly have 2 waters. You just have a larger puddle of the exact same continuous substance.
Oh, that's wild. Okay.
Yeah. And the English language, tracing all the way back through its Germanic and Old French roots, categorizes advice as a continuous, boundless substance. It is conceptualized not as a series of separate ideas, but as a fluid pool of wisdom.
Okay, so because it lacks a built-in boundary, you simply cannot count it. You can't ask for 3 advices any more than you can ask for, like, 3 muds.
That is exactly the cognitive architecture at play. If you want to count a mass noun, you are forced to provide a linguistic container. You cannot ask for 3 waters, but you can definitely ask for 3 glasses of water. The glass provides the boundary.
Ah, okay.
And that is why the friend in the text tells him the correct phrasing is, give me a piece of advice. The word piece acts as the container, allowing us to kind of scoop out a measurable portion from this formless substance called advice.
Wow, that completely reframes the entire concept for me. And in the text, the character who made the mistake has this wonderful, super dramatic reaction where he just stares and says, "So, I was wrong all my life."
It's a total existential crisis for him.
It really is. He realizes he has been confidently operating with this massive blind spot for years. But then the text moves right into this brilliant, almost slapstick practice sequence that I think really gets to the heart of why learning is so agonizing.
Oh, the practice scene is great.
Yeah, the friend makes him practice the correct phrase. So he focuses, he concentrates, and he nails it. He says, "Give me some advice." He gets praised for it. But then, armed with this brand new surge of confidence, he immediately puffs out his chest and declares, "Give me many advices."
He reverts to the exact same error the very second he stops consciously thinking about the rule.
Yes. And his friend, out of sheer frustration, just throws a slipper at him.
Which is an amazing reaction.
It's pure physical comedy, but it perfectly mirrors that agonizing feeling of muscle memory. We always talk about the brain building a superhighway for old habits and a dirt path for new ones, but what is actually happening physically in the brain that makes a lifelong habit so ridiculously stubborn, even after you intellectually understand that you are wrong?
So the physical mechanism behind that stubbornness is a biological process called myelination. When you learn a new word or a new behavior, neurons in your brain fire together to create a pathway.
Okay.
And every single time you repeat that behavior, like this guy saying advices for years, your brain recognizes that this specific pathway must be really important. So specialized cells called oligodendrocytes.
Whoa, oligodendrocyte.
Yeah, try saying that 3 times fast. These cells begin wrapping the axons of those neurons in a fatty substance called myelin.
So the brain is essentially like insulating its own wiring.
That is the exact biological function, yes.
Mhm.
Myelin acts as electrical insulation. Just to give you an idea of the scale, an electrical signal traveling down an unmyelinated neuron moves at about maybe 2 miles per hour.
Pretty slow.
Very slow. But a signal traveling down a heavily myelinated neuron can move it up to 200 miles per hour. It is an exponential increase in processing speed. So over a lifetime, the incorrect phrasing, saying many advices, has become incredibly heavily myelinated. It requires almost zero cognitive effort for him to fire that signal.
While the new rule, the correct way, asking for a piece of advice has absolutely zero myelin. It's just a raw, slow, clunky connection.
Exactly. And this entirely explains the relapse. When the character focuses intensely, he forces the electrical signal down that slow, unmyelinated dirt path, and he gets it right. But the very moment he feels confident, his conscious focus drops.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, under any kind of emotional shift, stress, excitement, or in this case, overconfidence, the brain acts to conserve energy. It automatically routes the electrical signal down the path of least resistance. The signal zips down that myelinated fast track, and before he even realizes his mouth is moving, he blurts out many advices.
That makes the slipper toss in the text so much more interesting because the friend throws a shoe at him,
Yep.
right, which creates a loud slap and a sudden physical shock. It is a literal pattern interrupt.
It absolutely is.
It's this external shock designed to knock the brain off autopilot, forcing the conscious mind to wake up, re-engage, and abandon that myelinated path. It just perfectly captures that 2 steps forward, 1 step back loop of acquiring any new skill.
It's exhausting.
It is. You learn the rule, you execute it really slowly, you get cocky, your brain defaults to the fast track, you fail spectacularly, and then you just have to start all over again.
And the sheer exhaustion of fighting your own neurology really cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
Constantly suppressing a heavily myelinated pathway requires an immense amount of cognitive load.
Which I think brings us perfectly to the sudden tonal shift in the story. Because we go from slapping each other with footwear directly into this moment of really raw vulnerability.
It's a big shift.
Yeah. The character completely drops the confident act. He looks at his friend and just seriously confesses, I feel shy when people laugh at my English. He just lays the emotional toll bare. And it really highlights the specific, unique pain of adult learning. Because when we're children, incompetence is just expected. We are allowed to fall over and say things wrong all day. But as adults, our identities are so deeply tied up in our competence.
That is a crucial distinction. In linguistics, there is this concept proposed by Stephen Kreischen called the affective filter.
The affective filter.
Yes. It suggests that emotional variables, things like anxiety, self-doubt, and especially the fear of embarrassment act as a literal physiological filter that prevents the brain from acquiring language.
Wow. It literally stops the learning process.
It does. When an adult feels threatened by mockery, their affective filter goes up. The cognitive resources that are desperately needed to build those new neural pathways are instantly hijacked by the amygdala, which is the brain's fear center. You literally, biologically, cannot learn when you feel ashamed.
That makes the friend's reaction in the script incredibly profound then, because 1 second he is this enforcer throwing a slipper, but the very moment the vulnerability is exposed, he completely transforms into a mentor. He just calmly says, everyone makes mistakes. That's how you learn. He doesn't just offer sympathy, he is actively dismantling that affective filter.
Exactly. He is establishing psychological safety. By normalizing the failure, he totally removes the threat from the environment. He's basically telling his friend's amygdala to stand down, which frees up the cognitive bandwidth needed to actually focus on that unmyelinated new rule.
And he follows up that psychological safety with a really fascinating piece of practical advice. He tells him, fix 1 mistake a day, and your English will change. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a fairly standard motivational poster. But if we actually consider the heavy cognitive load of myelin and that overwhelming, crushing feeling of realizing you've been wrong all your life, this actually seems like a highly strategic way to approach learning.
It is a strategy of radical cognitive constraint.
Oh, I like that phrasing.
Yeah, because when you realize your language skills are flawed, the natural human instinct is to try and fix absolutely everything at once. You want to learn all the grammar rules, memorize the vocabulary, perfect your accent, all simultaneously.
Right, you want to be perfect by tomorrow.
But our working memory can only hold a very few new pieces of information at a time. Trying to fix everything overloads the system, it leads to immediate failure, and Inevitably, it spikes that effective filter all over again.
And you just end up completely paralyzed, terrified to open your mouth at the tea stall.
Precisely. So by restricting the goal to fixing just one mistake a day, you are respecting the biological limits of your own brain. You are taking one specific, unmyelinated pathway and dedicating all your conscious focus to it. You aren't trying to be a perfect speaker. You're just trying to be a person who no longer says many advices.
That's brilliant.
It totally removes the anxiety of perfectionism and replaces it with manageable, incremental data processing.
So for you, the listener, thinking about whatever skill you are currently struggling to master right now, whether it is a new language, a complicated new software program at work, or even just a new way of communicating with your partner, let's just look back at the arc we've traveled today. We started with the intense social trauma of making a public mistake. We looked at how laughter is an evolutionary mechanism that flags broken patterns and enforces tribal boundaries, instantly isolating you when you stumble.
And then we dissected the actual cognitive architecture of English grammar, discovering why our brains categorize discrete, countable objects so differently from fluid, boundless mass nouns like advice.
And we looked under the hood at the neuroscience of habit, realizing that your brain physically insulates your oldest mistakes with myelin, making that fast track of error just incredibly difficult to resist when you are under any kind of pressure.
Right. And we explored the absolute necessity of lowering the affective filter through psychological safety, understanding that shame biologically prevents learning.
So the ultimate lesson here isn't just a grammar trick. It is a blueprint for surviving the truly grueling process of becoming competent. The goal is not to avoid the laughter entirely, or to somehow magically erase years of muscle memory overnight. The goal is simply to endure the temporary embarrassment, isolate the specific cognitive error, and grant yourself the grace and the patience to fix just one mistake a day.
Because the accumulation of those tiny microcorrections over time, that is the actual definition of mastery.
It really is. And, before we close this out, I want to leave you with one final thought. Based on our dive into mass nouns earlier, we established that the English language treats advice as an uncountable substance. It lacks boundaries. You can't put it in a neat little pile.
It's a continuous conceptual substance, very similar to water or air.
Right. And I think there is a hidden philosophical truth in that linguistic quirk. Because in our modern culture, we tend to treat advice as a transactional currency. We look for articles offering 5 discrete tips for success or 3 actionable steps to wealth.
Oh, constantly.
We really want wisdom to be a count noun. We want it to be a series of discrete coins we can just collect, put in our pockets, and hoard.
We want to acquire it cleanly and just be done with it. Move on to the next thing.
Exactly. But if the language inherently mandates that advice is an uncountable substance, maybe we need to completely change our mental model. Wisdom isn't a currency you acquire in a single, neat exchange. It is a fluid substance. It is an ongoing, messy exchange between people. It is something you have to continuously pour out and actively absorb. It shapes the landscape of your mind over time, rather than just filling up a piggy bank.
That's a great way to put it. And viewing it as a continuous flow rather than a static object completely changes the stakes. Because a flow requires constant participation, and inevitably, if you're in the flow, there will be turbulence.
There will absolutely be turbulence. So the next time you find yourself at the metaphorical tea stall and you confidently step out onto that flat linguistic sidewalk, only to trip wildly over your own tongue.
It happens to all of us.
When you hear the group laughter start to swell, and you feel that hot, heavy rush of embarrassment hit your chest.
Just remember that the neurological fast track tricked you, and the stumble is actually biologically necessary.
Exactly. You haven't failed the journey. You have simply identified today's one mistake. So acknowledge it, endure the laughter, fix the wiring, and keep moving forward.